After opening his own investigation agency, a young detective and his polar bear dedicate their lives to solving the biggest cases in their city and have to face the biggest challenge of their entire careers. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Timmy Failure, Mistakes Were Made, from 2020. In the city of Portland, Oregon, an 11-year-old boy named Timmy Failure founded his own investigative agency. The young detective has an imaginary polar bear as his partner and best friend. Together, the two work to solve the petty crimes that appear in the city. To get around the streets of Portland, Timmy uses the Failure Mobile, a two-wheeled electric vehicle that his mother won in a church raffle. That afternoon, the boy goes to his schoolmate's house to investigate the theft of his backpack. Gunnar says he wants to recover the Swiss Army knife that was in the bag and, after analyzing the crime scene, Timmy uses his voice recorder to make some observations. Before leaving, the boy decides to pay a visit to Gabe's room. The boy has a Swiss Army knife in his hands and his brother's backpack is hanging behind his door, but Timmy doesn't notice any of this before he is thrown out. He spends the whole night in his office working on that case, until his mother comes home from work and takes him out to eat. During dinner, the boy asks his mother to get rid of the clothes in his closet so that he has more space to work, but Patty says she won't do that and suggests that Timmy find another place to set up his office. The woman reveals that she has always dreamed of living in New York and says that the city would be a great place for the young man to open his agency. However, when he imagines having to compete with Broadway shows, the young detective gives up on the idea. The next morning, as he walks to school alongside Total, Timmy continues to think of new strategies to unravel the disappearance of Gunnar's backpack. When he enters the room, Mr. Crocus informs him that it's Timmy's turn to look after the class hamster that week and orders the boy to pick up the animal from Maxine's house the next day. Otherwise, he'll be sent to detention. His closest colleagues are Molly Moskins and Charles Tukas, a former employee of his agency. In addition to them, there is also a mysterious girl with whom Timmy refuses to talk. Since it's exam day, Mr. Crocus divides the class into quartets and says that each student's grade will be given by the average of their group. In this way, the teacher wants to encourage partnership and collaboration between the young people. When he hears this, Charles is furious because he knows that Timmy doesn't like studying. In his defense, the boy says he has too many other worries and needs to devote all his time to his work as a detective. To avoid damaging his friend's grades, he decides to drag his desk away from them and leave the group. However, this makes his teacher furious and Timmy is sent to the principal's office. During recess, he sits next to the railing to talk to his business partner who is outside, because polar bears are not allowed in that school. The young detective is convinced that the Russians who live in Portland are plotting against him and he needs to keep an eye on everyone who approaches him, because he never knows if they have an agent infiltrating the school. After school, Patty is called to school for the 10th time that year and, while talking to Mr. Crocus about Timmy's misbehavior, the boy takes his math test. The teacher is worried that the boy won't be able to enter elementary school next year because of his bad grades. However, for Timmy this would be a dream, because he believes that elementary school will be a big prison, with huge classes and an absurd amount of homework. Back home, Patty reveals that she is upset with her son, because if the boy is expelled from school, she won't be able to afford a private school for him. The next morning, at Mr. Crocus' request, Timmy goes to Maxine's house to pick up the class hamster and asks Total to keep an eye on the mobile Failure. When he gets to the girl's room, he discovers that the hamster has perished and Maxine claims that it perished of natural causes. So the boy asks for a shoebox to put the body in and take it to the laboratory to open an investigation. On leaving Maxine's room, Timmy spots the polar bear having fun in the pool, but decides to continue on his way to the morgue so that a forensic analysis can be carried out on the rodent's body. However, when he leaves the house, the boy discovers that his Failure mobile has been stolen. As he walks back home, he is furious and blames Total for having gone swimming instead of keeping an eye on the vehicle. Unsure of what to do, Timmy goes after his former investigative partner and asks Charles to help him find the vehicle. However, the boy refuses to work on the case because Timmy always makes trouble for him. So the young detective promises that if his friend can help him find the vehicle, he will dedicate himself to his studies so that they can both get good grades. After convincing his friend to return to his agency, Timmy goes to the library and asks Flo to help him gather information about the Russians, as he believes they are responsible for the disappearance of the mobile Failure. However, the woman says she doesn't know any Russians who live in Portland. To the boy's surprise, Molly appears and tells him that Karina's grandmother came from Russia, which makes her half Russian. At that moment, Timmy understands why he has never been able to feel comfortable with his classmate. That evening, while the detective is working on his case, the doorbell rings and Patty asks him to open the door. The woman is seeing a new guy and has decided to invite him to dinner. Before opening the door to the stranger, Timmy goes to question him and gets a keyring with a rabbit's foot for good luck. This is enough to give the boy a very bad impression of Crispin, as he comes to believe that he has a habit of eliminating animals. Then his mother appears and asks the man to come in for dinner. During the meal, the boy thinks of some ways to get Crispin to stop dating his mother and considers the idea of sending Total to threaten him at the police station, since the man is a policeman. That week, Timmy is sent to see Mr. Jenkins, the school psychologist. However, the young man doesn't feel comfortable revealing his plans, as he believes the room is bugged and being watched by the Russians. After class, the detective invites Charles to go and investigate Karina's house in search of new clues, but they both end up being caught by the girl and discover that her father owns a bank in the city. So Timmy becomes convinced that the mobile failure is hidden in the bank vault and begins to think of a plan to get it back. However, before the boy can get the vehicle back, his mother realizes that it has disappeared and Timmy is forced to lie, saying that he lent it to Molly. He then goes to the girl's house to ask her to cover for him until the mobile failure is recovered. However, in order to do this, Molly says that Timmy will have to take part in a protest in favor of animals with her, as well as painting his nails. The next day, when they leave school, the two detective friends go to the center of town to break into the bank in search of the vehicle. After putting on their fencing masks, they enter the establishment, but are barred by the security guard and have to flee. After that, Timmy is sent back to the psychologist's office and Mr. Jenkins says that he has checked every corner of the place to make sure that they are not being watched. When he hears this, the boy feels more at ease and decides to tell the truth. He claims to be a detective and says that someone is trying to sabotage his agency. So the psychologist decides to play along and says he wants to hire the boy to watch Mr. Crocus during class. That night, Timmy intends to help Total break into the bank to get the failure mobile back and thinks of a plan to get him in unnoticed. However, he realizes that the bear will get distracted during the mission and end up causing an even bigger problem by trying to break into the safe. At this point, he realizes that he will need a new plan and, when he leaves the school, he runs into Crispin. The man offers the boy a lift and tries to make friends with him on the way, but Timmy shows no interest in what he has to say. During the journey, the young man decides to continue on his way on foot and, after getting out of the car, quickly runs home. That night, Timmy receives terrible news. His mother tells him that they will have to move out of the house because the landlord is going to raise the rent and she won't be able to pay it. Upon hearing this, the detective is furious and says that this change will destroy the future of his agency. However, there is nothing he can do to change this sad fate, which makes him even more disappointed. During the week, the boy goes on a field trip with his class and teacher Crocus asks Timmy to behave during the trip. Otherwise, he'll be suspended from school. When they arrive at the hydroelectric plant, one of the employees explains how the facility works and Timmy looks around in search of Karina. However, he can't find the girl and comes up with a theory that she is carrying out a grand conspiracy plan to take out the entire city's power. In order to prevent this catastrophe, Timmy goes to ask his friend for help, but after what happened at the bank, Charles refuses to help him because he knows that the boy will only get him into trouble. However, the detective is not satisfied with this answer and manages to convince Charles to distract Mr. Crocus. Meanwhile, Timmy is hurrying down the stairs and ends up being spotted by one of the guards. His teacher then decides to go after him, but the young man always manages to lose him. He's looking for Karina, but the truth is that the girl is with the rest of the class making the most of the excursion. The detective then goes to the top floor of the facility and checks all the rooms in search of his colleague. As he can't find her anywhere, he begins to suspect that the girl is in the restricted area and intends to go after her. Just then, Mr. Crocus appears and orders the boy away from the door, but Timmy ignores him and ends up outside the dam. While he's walking around, his scarf gets caught and he can't get it off. Just then, his teacher appears and orders the boy to return. When he discovers that he is trapped, the old man decides to go there to help him, despite being terrified of heights. Meanwhile, the hydroelectric official takes the children to the control room and informs them that Dan is going to open the spillway to release the water reservoir. When he hears the noise, Mr. Crocus despairs because he realizes that the dam is about to burst. In an attempt to save Timmy, he rips off the boy's scarf and runs back to the door. However, the floodgates open before they can get to safety and they both lie down on the ground to avoid being swept away. However, the two are very lucky, as the reservoir is well below where the pair don't even come into contact with the water. When he goes to tell his teacher the good news, Timmy realizes that he is not well and has to ask for help to get him out of there. After this traumatic episode, the detective's life became even more complicated. His mother was called to the school to have a chat with the principal and the psychologist who looks after the students. When he gets home, Timmy discovers that he was almost expelled from school. but Mr. Jenkins talked to the principal and managed to get him suspended for just 3 days. But the problems don't end there. When she asked her boss for time off to stay at home and look after her son during her suspension period, Patty was fired and now has to scramble to find another job. Furious at everything that has happened, the woman decides to put an end to the boy's false agency and throws all his things in the garbage can. All she wants is for Timmy to be like the other children and stop living in his imaginary world. But he's incapable of doing that. Now that he has lost his agency overnight, the detective can no longer work on his cases and loses all his clients. To make matters worse, he is forced to move in with his mother and has to learn to cope on his own with all these changes happening at the same time in his life. When he finally returns to school, Timmy finds out that Mr. Crocus has resigned after everything that has happened and another teacher has been hired to replace him. Despite all the problems and disagreements, the boy liked his teacher and feels bad about what happened to him. When Patty gets home, she sees her son sitting on the floor watching TV and begins to worry about him. Timmy is no longer the curious, enthusiastic child he always was and doesn't even show any excitement when his mother tells him she's got a new job. As his company is bankrupt, the boy has to make the drastic decision to fire his only employee and says goodbye to Total, his imaginary polar bear. His new life as a normal boy is very lonely and boring. So, in an attempt to cheer him up, Karina gives his classmate a cookie as a present and Mr. Jenkins sits down next to him to chat during recess. The psychologist asks what Timmy's plans are for the future and he reveals that he intends to act like the rest of his colleagues. Upon hearing this, Jenkins says that the boy is not like the other students and advises him to make peace with his authenticity. In addition, the boy must learn from his mistakes and use them to become an improved version of himself. When the psychologist leaves, Timmy looks at the cookie again and notices something he hadn't noticed before. The feed is bugged and, when he finds out, the young man gives a loud shout into the microphone to let the Russians know that he has foiled their plans. After doing so, the little detective gets up and goes after his investigative partner. He knows that the task of recovering Total will be very difficult, so he decides to call in police reinforcements. When Crispin leaves work, Timmy goes to ask for his help and informs him that he needs to get into the zoo to bring his polar bear back. When he hears this, the man gets excited about the idea and takes the boy to the zoo. However, when they go to buy tickets to visit the polar bear cage, the attendant informs them that the tank is closed for renovation and the bears have been transferred to another facility in Utah. At this point, Timmy despairs because he can't bear the thought of being separated from his best friend forever. So the boy decides to escape and runs to the cage to investigate. After breaking in, the detective tries to contact Total via his radio communicator, but gets no response. After a few minutes, he decides to accept the consequences of having abandoned his partner and leaves, convinced that he will never see him again. Suddenly, however, the boy hears a noise coming from the radio and realizes that Total is trying to communicate with him. When he looks in the tank again, Timmy is very surprised to see that the bear has not been taken away and has been in the zoo all this time waiting for him. At this point, Crispin was already asking the guards to help him find the boy. However, his despair comes to an end when Timmy appears and says that he has successfully completed his mission. After this scare, he takes the boy home and, on the way, they both spot a guy trying to steal a woman's handbag. After taking the object, the man runs off and Timmy advises Crispin to go after him, as he works at the police station. The problem is that his mother's boyfriend is a traffic cop and isn't used to taking part in chases. When he finds the thief, he asks the man to return the bag, but ends up being attacked by him. Seeing Crispin in danger, Timmy plans to intervene to help him and takes the wheel. The boy speeds up the vehicle and almost runs them over. As he doesn't know how to brake the car, he ends up on the other side of the road and destroys Mr. Crocus' house with his polar bear in the back of the truck. Luckily, the whole disaster only happened in his imagination. Knowing that the risk of something similar happening is very high, he decides to let the local police do their job and resolve the situation. While the thief is being arrested, a lady approaches the truck and asks the boy to move the car so that she can pass. At that moment, Timmy decides to take a chance and reverses, but ends up crashing his vehicle into the lamppost behind him. Despite not having suffered any serious injuries, the boy is taken to hospital and his mother arrives shortly afterwards. Patty is extremely relieved to see that her son is okay, as she believed that something bad had happened to him and Crispin didn't want to tell the truth. Realizing that she could have lost her son that day, the woman asks for forgiveness for destroying Timmy's agency and says that he can go back to working as a detective. A few days later, the boy goes to talk to Crispin again and invites him to the protest in favor of animals that his school is promoting. This way, he'll be able to find Patty and try to make peace with her, because after what happened, the woman didn't want to talk to him anymore. At this point, Crispin takes advantage of the visit to surprise Timmy and reveals that he has found his failure mobile. The vehicle was parked in a prohibited place and was therefore taken away. When the day of the protest finally arrives, Flo invites Molly, the organizer of the event, to give a speech. However, the girl decides to give the opportunity to Timmy. The boy then takes to the stage with the mobile failure alongside Total to make people aware of the importance of including polar bears in that school. Despite being different, these animals also deserve their place in society and should be respected. Upon hearing the boy's speech, both Patty and Mr. Jenkins realize that Timmy is talking about himself and everyone applauds him for his beautiful words. The young detective would very much like Mr. Crocus to be there to listen to his speech, but when he looks around, he soon realizes why his teacher hasn't shown up. Timmy is once again being watched by the Russians and his mind soon comes up with the theory that Mr. Crocus has been captured by them. So his next mission is to rescue his beloved teacher. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.